Testing. Is that like majorly loud now? One, two. Sound check. Keep going. Okay. Sound check for the court reporter. Testing. One, two, three, four. Testing, testing. One, two. Sound check for the court reporter. How is that? Okay?
Yes. Committee will come to order. Before we begin, I ask unanimous consent that members not on the subcommittee be permitted to sit with the subcommittee at today's hearing and ask questions. Welcome to our first subcommittee hearing of the 115th Congress. I'd like to thank Chairman Schuster for giving me the opportunity to serve again as chairman of this subcommittee. Welcome to our new ranking member, Mr. Johnson, and welcome to the new and returning members of the subcommittee. I look forward to building on our bipartisan record of accomplishment from the last two Congresses. Since 2013, we have saved $3.4 billion on GSA projects, passed the Sandy Recovery Improvement Act, passed the Federal Assets Sale and Transfer Act, and continue to look for ways to drive down rising disaster costs and losses. These were major accomplishments, and I thank everyone who was involved in them. This Congress, my two top priorities are public buildings reform and disaster legislation. I think that we can exceed the GSA savings from last Congress, and we have some important reforms to get across the finish line in the emergency management world. I hope we can have disaster legislation and a GSA reform bill ready for the committee to consider in the first half of this year. The purpose of today's hearing is to look at the resources and investments that have gone into building the National Preparedness System, which was authorized 10 years ago in the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act. Since 2013, more than $47 billion in preparedness grant funding has been provided to state, territorial, local, and tribal governments to help reach the current level of national preparedness. This funding has helped these entities prepare to rebuild our infrastructure and communities when disasters strike. The State Homeland Security Grant Program and the Urban Areas Security Initiative help first responders prepare for potential acts of terrorism by supporting planning, training, and equipment needs. The Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program, including the SAFER and Fire Prevention and Safety Grants, help fire departments improve their baseline emergency response capability. The Emergency Management Performance Grant provides federal funding to state and local governments for planning, training, exercises, and key emergency management personnel. Port security grant funds are used to secure and harden port facilities against the potential of a terror attack. These grants play an important role in building and sustaining the national preparedness system. As a former mayor, I know all too well what it means to be a good neighbor and how critical help from your surrounding communities can be in times of emergency. No single community can handle every disaster on its own. And no community can afford all of the equipment and personnel to handle every disaster. These grants make it possible for mutual aid between communities and across our country. For example, every city can't afford a level 1 urban search and rescue team. In fact, if every city had a team, the teams wouldn't have enough resources and would receive sufficient training because already limited resources would be spread too thin. But during a big disaster, help pours in from all directions in a timely manner. And emergency managers make this possible. They get the right resources to the right place in the fastest time. Their actions save lives and property. So we have to make sure that investments in the national preparedness system are wise investments and that the taxpayer is getting the biggest bang for its buck. We also need to make sure that resources are being directed to where they are needed the most. Over the past 15 years, we have made significant progress in improving the nation's ability to prevent, protect against, mitigate, respond to, and recover from disasters, both natural and man-made. But what work remains to be done? For example, I know many fire departments still lack the most basic requirements for a safe and effective response. Many firefighters still share personnel protective equipment and gear. In addition, other fire departments are operating with severely outdated and sometimes inoperable equipment. The AFG and SAFER programs help local fire departments meet these critical needs. In Pennsylvania, 97% of our fire departments are all or mostly volunteer. In my own district, the Freeland Fire Department was able to obtain a fire grant for 103 sets of personnel protective equipment, replacing outdated equipment which does not meet the current safety standards. This equipment is essential for firefighters to do their job and to keep them safe. I also have another community trying to replace a 42-year-old fire engine. Without these grant funds, these communities would not be able to secure the needed equipment. While we're talking about firefighter community, please let me take 1 minute to recognize a devastating loss in Harrisburg. Last Friday, Lieutenant Dennis DeVoe of Mount Pleasant Fire Company, number 8, was killed by a drunk driver while trying to respond to a deadly house fire. Mr. Martinuska, please carry our prayers and condolences back to the Pennsylvania firefighter community and to Lieutenant DeVoe's wife and 4 children. I'm also particularly concerned right now about the recent wave of bomb threats to Jewish community centers across our country. Over the last 2 decades, Jewish institutions have been the target of domestic terrorist attacks. The current threats are outrageous, and we must do more to protect these targeted institutions. FEMA has been charged with the difficult task of developing and managing the many components that build the national preparedness system, from the national preparedness goal, hazard, and risk assessments, state and federal preparedness reports, and preparedness grants. Today, we have brought together the key stakeholders that receive various preparedness funds to understand how they leverage this federal investment to build national preparedness. These stakeholders represent our nation's first responders and emergency managers. These are the people who work daily to build preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation capabilities to make our communities more resilient to vulnerabilities, regardless of the cause. I look forward to the conversations we will have today on the success our nation has achieved and where we need to focus to continue to build a prepared 21st century infrastructure. I thank you all for being here. I now call on Ranking Member of the Subcommittee, Mr. Johnson, for a brief opening statement.
I want to thank the ranking member of the committee as well as my fellow committee members in allowing me to serve in this distinguished capacity as ranking member of this subcommittee. I'm pleased to be here today, and I'm excited to work with Chairman Belletta and others on the subcommittee to advance the important issues of emergency management as well as other issues over which we have jurisdiction. Emergency preparedness and response are important issues that most take for granted until a disaster happens, and then suddenly there is a need for emergency services. Only then are we, many of us, reminded of the need for a substantive examination of what could have or should have occurred before the emergency or disaster happened. It is reassuring to know that this committee is one of the few that proactively examines the issues and needs of our communities, as well as our talented emergency managers and first responders who have to endure in the face of often tragic consequences. A case in point, earlier this year, 2 back-to-back tornadoes struck Georgia that caused substantial damage and forced hundreds into temporary housing shelters. Our first responders who lived in those same communities had to continue to do their jobs even as their families, friends, and other loved ones, perhaps even unknowing to them, had been injured or rendered homeless. This Congress, I look forward to advancing economic development issues across the nation, especially in underperforming areas. While much of the country recovered economically, and unemployment dropped to 4.6% under the Obama administration's policies, there are still pockets in the country that are hurting and in need of further economic development assistance. The 2016 National Preparedness Report assesses the nation's achievement and identifies any gaps in meeting the 32 core capabilities identified in the National Preparedness Goal. The 2016 report found a few areas where state and local first responders have adequately met their goals, but now need to focus on maintaining those capabilities. Moreover, the report found several areas where the nation is lacking, such as recovery, and we need to ensure a sustained commitment to these areas. This is important because the administration is proposing drastic cuts to FEMA's preparedness activities. The budget was released this morning, and now we are having the opportunity to ponder these drastic cuts in this skinny budget situation for ourselves. Disasters will always occur, so we should be investing in pre-disaster mitigation to save lives, minimize damage, and speed up recovery. Reports have shown that for every dollar invested in pre-disaster mitigation, we save $3 to $4 on the back end. Despite needing more work, our emergency management system is recognized worldwide as being one of the best. Without sustained funding to maintain the capabilities that we have obtained and to focus on those capabilities that need improvement, we will fall behind. I look forward to today's testimony, and I welcome our witnesses to this hearing on the National Preparedness System and the non-disaster grants used to develop core capabilities to ensure a robust and prepared nation for all hazards. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Johnson. At this time, I'd like to recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Schuster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing on national preparedness. Don't let the number of members here not think this is a really important meeting. There's a budget hearing going on today, so that's where all the action is. If you saw the front page of the Washington Post, it's going to be an interesting several weeks here in Washington. And I want to also take special thanks to the Mayor of Baltimore, Mayor Pugh. Thank you for coming. I understand you have to give the State of the City address today, so you'll be leaving before the end of this, but we really appreciate your input and your views on preparedness and all the things that FEMA does in the federal government and interacting with your city. So thank you for being here. I think everything's already been said about FEMA, the details, and FEMA is extremely important to the national preparedness, preparing, coordinating, facilitating the federal response in disasters, whether man-made or natural. And in the last 15 years, almost 2,000 FEMA's responded to almost 2,000 natural disasters and emergencies provided by the federal government to rebuild our infrastructure and our communities. There's little doubt, as you see what's on the front page of the Washington Post today, we need to rein in the budget. So we're going to have to take a close look at the President's proposal. But look, I'm in favor of making sure we tighten our belt, just like the city of Baltimore has to do at times, just like families across America have to do. So we all got to look very hard and find out ways that we cut the fat, but we don't cut the muscle, because that's incredibly important to us. But reducing the size and scope of government excuse me, is something we need to make sure we're focused on. And in these times of budgetary uncertainty, we need to prepare to do more with less. That's just the way it is sometimes to get our financial house in order. However, FEMA and the National Preparedness System's role in keeping our vital infrastructure open and functioning in times of emergency cannot be understated, and we've got to make sure, as I said, we take a close look at the President's budget and see where those cuts are, especially when it comes to FEMA and national preparedness. But we have to make sure we do everything that FEMA has the resources so that when an unexpected natural disaster occurs or a man-made event, that the resiliency of the infrastructure is there and that we keep America safe and competitive. So again, I appreciate all of you being here today, especially Mayor. Really appreciate taking your time out of your day to do this and look forward to hearing your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. We have assembled a panel of key stakeholders that represent various aspects of the preparedness system and the spectrum of grant uses. The Honorable Catherine Pugh, the Mayor of Baltimore, will be testifying on behalf of the United States Conference of Mayors. Wendy Smith-Reeve, the Director of the Arizona Division of Emergency Management, is here, representing the National Emergency Management Association. Nick Crossley, the Director of the Hamilton County Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency in Cincinnati, will bring testimony for the International Association of Emergency Managers and the National Association of Counties. Welcome to Art Marta Nuska, the president of the Pennsylvania Professional Firefighters Association, who will be testifying for the International Association of Firefighters. The Massachusetts Port Authority Maritime Security Director, Joe Lawless, has joined us and will offer testimony on behalf of the American Association of Port Authorities. We will also hear testimony from Mr. Tom Roberts, the Assistant Sheriff from the Los Angeles Metropolitan Police Department. William Deroff is the Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Director of the Washington Office of the Jewish Federations of North America. And welcome to Michael Feinstein, President and Chief Executive Officer, Bender Jewish Community Center of Greater Washington. I ask unanimous consent that our witnesses' full statements be included in the record. Without objection, so ordered. For our witnesses, since your written testimony has been made a part of the record, the subcommittee would request that you limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes. And as stated, I know Mayor Pugh has to get back for her State of the City address and needs to leave early, so let's get started. Mayor Pugh, please proceed.
First, let me say, Chairman Bartlett, thank you as the ranking member, and Johnson and the members of this committee. I am Catherine Pugh. I am the mayor of Baltimore, and believe it or not, this is my 100th day as the mayor of the city of Baltimore. I did have the honor, by the way, to meet President Trump when he was president-elect, when he came over to Baltimore to our Army-Navy game. And I want you to know that what the letter that I handed him and the conversation that I had was around our infrastructure needs in our city. And as you well know, we are pleased that this subcommittee is led by you and two veterans of local government. Chairman Barletta, we especially appreciate the opportunity to discuss these issues with you as a former mayor. I'm a relatively new mayor, but my colleagues tell me once a mayor, as you, I'm sure, feel, always a mayor. And we expect that the ranking member Johnson, as a former DeKalb County commissioner who is married to a current one, will also understand our perspective on these issues. It is the local first responders who are first on the scene when an event occurs and local officials who manage the response. My basic message today is that mayors of all of our cities, local officials across this nation strongly support the existing menu of preparedness programs. I understand what you say in terms of cutting the fat, but I can tell you that in urban environments you'll find very little fat. They are working and have improved our capabilities. Particularly important is the incentives they provide for federal, tribal, state, territorial, and local jurisdictions to work together. There have been cuts in the funding available through several key programs in recent years, and we are alarmed by the additional cuts, which we know by the release of today's budget are coming. These funding reductions have had and will have a significant impact on our ability to sustain and enhance capabilities. In Baltimore and in cities across the nation, at a time when we see an increase in the number and intensity of natural disasters and an increase in violent extremism and incidents of terrorism. And let me just add that when you are surrounded by water, so I was so glad to see the representative from Boston here because we have a lot in common. The April 15, 2013 bombing at the Boston Marathon continues to provide an excellent example of how DHS investments provided through the Urban Area Security Initiative program have really paid off. There can be no doubt that they contributed significantly to the Boston area's quick and effective response to this horrific act of terrorism. Since 2003, the Baltimore UASI has invested tens of millions of dollars in preparedness initiatives that have benefited our city and our region. Recent and expected further funding cuts, however, are severely affecting our ability to maintain and build on these investments and cut across law enforcement, fire, health, and human services, information technology, and the many other public safety services we rely on every day. And I was listening to you, Chairman Barlow, when you talked about the fact that fires occur and people die, and I'm reminded of 6 babies who died in a recent fire in Baltimore. And Much of the equipment that we need, we just don't have, and we need more. For over 10 years, the City of Baltimore has led the efforts of Regional Maryland Task Force to Urban Search and Rescue Teams, which can respond to regional, state, and national disasters, earthquakes, hurricanes, widespread tornadoes, and man-made and terrorist events within 2 hours. The Emergency Management Performance Grant and other preparedness grant programs have been essential to the staffing and operations of our Office of Emergency Management. I actually got a chance to spend all day because we didn't know whether we were going to get the 9 inches of snow or the 2 inches of snow in our Office of Emergency Services, just to see how well it works, but more importantly, how all of us come together to make sure that we can respond to any emergencies in our city. Unfortunately, due to this drastic funding cut, the City of Baltimore and Baltimore UASI funding to maintain support and enhance our team was eliminated. I must add that we appreciate the work which this committee has done to strengthen the Urban Search and Rescue Program, and I'm sure you share our concerns and the impact of these cuts on our team in Baltimore. Based on our experience with the National Preparedness System, America's mayors recommend the following. We urge Congress to resist further cuts in preparedness and other homeland security programs. We urge you to continue to resist any attempts to consolidate homeland security grants. And I say that because many of our cities survive in different environments, whether we are surrounded by water or surrounded by land, or have massive transportation systems or none at all. All of us count on these kinds of grants. We suggest that any program reform or change be consistent with the following principles developed by the U.S. Conference of Mayors and other organizations which represent local governments, first responders, and emergency managers. Increase transparency, and we're all for that. Increase local involvement. Provide flexibility with accountability. Protect local funding. Sustain terrorism prevention. Provide incentives for metropolitan area regionalization. And I can tell you that as a former state senator who has a great relationship with her counterparts in both Baltimore County and my Prince George's County, and I think about my Harford County executive, who was my best friend, who happens to be a Republican, but however, we were best friends and runners both in the Senate, who I chaired on to become a member of my committee, is now the Harford County executive, and my Howard County executive, who also, we all three of us served on the same committee. So we know that regionalism is important and that we can work together. We believe that the FEMA administrator should have emergency management experience at the local level. While we understand the need to reduce costs, we want you to know that we have significant concerns with the disaster deductible concept that FEMA has proposed. I appreciate this opportunity to testify before you today on this issue of vital importance to me, my city, and my region, and to mayors and other local officials across the nation. The U.S. Conference of Mayors looks forward to working with you to continue to strengthen the national preparedness system. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony, and I understand what you went through trying to remove the snow. I left my hometown yesterday where they had 30 inches of snow. So
Wow.
I'm very happy I am not the mayor today.
I'm sure you are.
But you know, there's a perfect example where I had a conference call with the mayor and state officials, and you know, they just had received the call. The police chief said they had just received the call where a woman was stuck in her home. She needed her dialysis treatment, and there was no way to get her out with all the snow, whether the National Guard had to come in. But these are the situations that you deal with every day. So thank you.
You can imagine your 30 inches of snow would be like 9 inches in Baltimore.
Yeah, right.
And so we had to make sure all the seniors had food. We had to make sure that all of our centers were open to take care of the homelessness. So all of these things are important to
And there's very
us.
little money in your budget to deal with that.
Very little, very little.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Ms. Smith-Reed, you may proceed.
Thank you so much. It's probably not a good time to just note that I came from 90-degree weather. We have had snowstorms in the past, and I understand in the complexities associated with that. And just like any other natural disaster, we all have to work together to ensure that we support and assist our community. So good morning and thank you, Chairman Barletta, Ranking Member Johnson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee for allowing me to testify before you today to discuss the role of National Preparedness System in building and supporting a strong 21st century infrastructure for America. My name is Wendy Smith-Reeve. I am the Director for the Arizona Department of Emergency and Military Affairs Division of Emergency Management, and I also serve as the President of the National Emergency Management Association. NEMA represents the state emergency management directors of all 50 states, 8 territories, and the District of Columbia. Presidential Policy Directive 8 National Preparedness recognizes that preparedness is a shared responsibility. At its core, this directive requires the involvement of the whole community in a systematic effort to keep the nation safe from harm and resilient when struck by hazards such as natural disasters, acts of terrorism, and pandemics. The foundation of the National Preparedness System is the Threat Hazard Identification and Risk Assessment process known as THIRA. While not perfect, we believe THIRA and the larger National Preparedness System structure has provided a baseline against we can now measure progress towards a common goal. Improvements and tweaks will always be needed to ensure the process represents and incorporates the best available data and measures key indicators that communicate the gaps that exist and progress made over time. This reality must be balanced, however, with the need for change to improve outcomes and not succumb to the interest in change for the sake of change that could set us back years. The implementation tool for the critical functions of the National Preparedness System is the suite of preparedness grants administered by FEMA that are essential to state, tribal, county, and local governments. From what we understand, based on preliminary details from the fiscal year 18 budget blueprint, significant cuts may be proposed to some preparedness grants, including the Emergency Management Performance Grant and the State Homeland Security Grant programs. It is impossible to imagine a scenario in which these cuts, as significant as they are, do not, over time, affect and erode the operational capabilities at the state, tribal, county, and local levels. These proposed cuts are not reflective of our homeland's current threat environment. The threat of terror attacks here in the United States continues to evolve and increase, and communities in every state face the ever-changing and emerging threats from natural disasters. FEMA's all hazards focus allows capabilities to be built and utilized in a number of various events, ranging from wildfires in the west, Hurricane Matthew in the east, and response to terror events in Chattanooga, Fort Hood, Boston, and San Bernardino. 2016 included a range of hazards which resulted in 53 emergency and major disaster declarations by the President and 47,778 events that were resolved through the thriving emergency management system that exists at the state, county, and local and tribal levels. Capabilities afforded through EMPG contributed to the ability of those events to be managed without additional federal expenditures. By proposing significant cuts for fiscal year 18, our investments since the inception of these grants are at risk and may actually increase costs to the federal government if more events begin to exceed state and local capabilities as a direct result of our inability to maintain pace with our ever-changing environment. Declining budgets at all levels of government have increased the need to leverage resources and facilitate cross-jurisdictional coordination. We can no longer afford to operate in separate silos. We cannot divorce declining budgets from the structure that facilitates grant allocation. Today's dynamic threat environment requires a grant program that prioritizes investments based on risk while maintaining our collective ability to sustain prior investments that support national goals. Building a 21st century national preparedness system should also acknowledge that the federal government's response to disaster needs to be analyzed and streamlined to reduce redundancy, bureaucracy, and unneeded overhead and administrative expense. Together, let's analyze and eliminate redundancies and conflicts and get back to a streamlined and synchronized effort that serves and supports all parties. FEMA was originally created with the intent to serve and support communities impacted by disaster as the single coordinating body for federal assistance. This is no longer the model that we have today. It is important to acknowledge that increasing the nation's preparedness and response capabilities for the 21st century requires a strong national preparedness system that facilitates the necessary collaboration, coordination, and structure for all critical stakeholders to achieve a common goal. If national systems are robust and implemented effectively, state, tribal, county, and local governments can then make the tough decisions on how best to prioritize investment of critical grant dollars. Decisions regarding where to spend declining grant dollars are best made by those with firsthand knowledge of the threats facing their states and communities around the country. On behalf of the state of Arizona and NEMA members nationwide, we appreciate the continued support of this subcommittee as we work together to ensure that as a nation, we sustain a strong national preparedness system. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony, and I look forward to the questions any of the subcommittee members may have.
And thank you for your testimony. Mr. Crossley, you may proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Barletta, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Nick Crossley. Sorry, thank you. I'll start over. Good morning, Chairman Barletta, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Nick Crossley, and I'm the Director of the Hamilton County, Ohio Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency. I appear before you today in my dual roles as First Vice President of the International Association of Emergency Managers and as a member of the National Association of Counties. I'm here today as a representative of not just these organizations, but the entire profession of emergency management practitioners, the profession dedicated to protecting America's local communities from all hazards and threats, natural and man-made. Chairman Barletta, in your home county of Luzerne, Pennsylvania, Emergency Management Director Lucille Morgan spends most of her waking hours preparing for floods along the Susquehanna River, a recurring problem she has helped to manage multiple times during her 24-year career with the county's emergency management agency. Congressman Johnson, in DeKalb County, Georgia, Emergency Management Director Sue Loeffler is tasked with preparing for disasters in close proximity to the busiest airport in the world and the headquarters of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Sue works daily not just to help ensure the safe transport of various biohazards, including the Ebola virus, to and from CDC headquarters, but also to prepare the community's response to accidental introduction of these lethal biohazards in the community. Across America, local emergency management agencies are at the center of our nation's preparation, response, and recovery, and strive to create a culture of preparedness that builds and sustains a disaster-resistant and resilient homeland. We are grateful to be part of today's conversation because the mission we pursue daily is closely aligned with the goals of the National Preparedness System. In fact, over the last decade, the National Preparedness System, and specifically its Emergency Management Performance Grant, or EMPG, have become pivotal pillars of support for efficient and effective local emergency management. Through EMPG, the federal government supports ongoing local efforts to develop, evaluate, implement, and administer emergency operations plans, trainings, and exercises in a manner that best suits the needs of each community and is conducive to interagency collaboration. Since federal EMPG funds are always met with a 50-50 match from state and local recipients, the program is truly a partnership between local, state, and federal governments. By fostering this partnership, EMPG not only helps us protect our own communities, it enables emergency management agencies to support and assist each other when disasters strain our individual capacities. EMPG also helps states coordinate this support and assistance among counties both within and across state lines, ultimately creating a nationwide emergency management support structure that helps to save lives and lessen the impact of disasters. Over the last decade, this structure of support and assistance has strengthened our nation's response to disaster in a measurable and documented manner. To cite one example, after Superstorm Sandy struck in 2012, Ramsey County, Minnesota sent an emergency management practitioners trained under EMPG to the state of New York to reinforce the efforts of overwhelmed emergency management agencies. Without EMPG, this sort of interstate coordination and assistance simply would not have happened. and the short and long-term impact of the storm on New York and on our country would have been far greater. This is EMPG in action, increasing our nation's resiliency to disaster by fostering a structure of emergency management coordination, support, and assistance that crosses local and state lines. A weakened EMPG program would not only result in greater damage to life, property, and infrastructure when disaster strikes, it would also substantially increase the need for post-disaster aid from the federal government. Because of this, cuts to EMPG are short-sighted from a budgetary standpoint and counterproductive to the goals of the National Preparedness System. In conclusion, the Emergency Management Performance Grant advances the goals of the National Preparedness System by fostering partnerships between emergency management practitioners at all levels of government and in all corners of the country. When disasters strike our communities, these partnerships help to save lives, mitigate damage to property and infrastructure, and accelerate recovery. Thank you, Chairman Barletta and members of the subcommittee, for this opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Lawless, you may begin.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Barletta, Ranking Member Johnson, for convening this important and timely hearing. My name is Joseph Lawless. I'm the Director of Maritime Security at the Massachusetts Port Authority. I'm also the Police Chief at the Port Authority, and I'm here today on behalf of the American Association of Port Authorities, where I am the Chairman of the Security Committee. Since 9/11, port security remains a top priority for U.S. ports. Safe and secure seaport facilities are fundamental to protecting our borders and moving goods. Protecting the people and freight that move through seaports and surrounding communities is essential to keeping seaports safe and open for business. With 98% of overseas trade flowing through U.S. ports, a terrorist incident at a port could have a drastic impact on the U.S. economy. A key component of our nation's preparedness system has been the Port Security Grant Program. Since 2002, over $3 billion in port security grants have been appropriated. This is a vital funding source for port authorities and our partners to pay for unfunded mandates that have been put in place since 9/11. The AAPA is very concerned about the rumored budget cuts to the Port Security Grant in the administration's budget that was released today. A 40% cut to the Port Security Grant Program would have a devastating and cascading impact on our security, supply chain, and safety of our communities. Under the Safe Port Act, this program was authorized at $400 million. Unfortunately, the funding for this program has decreased, currently standing at a dangerously low level of $100 million. As costs of systems, maintenance, and equipment continue to rise, and security threats continue to evolve, this level of funding will bring into question the sustainability of the protection levels we have worked so hard to build over the last 15 years. Port security grant funds have helped port facilities and port areas to strengthen facility security and work in partnership with other agencies to enhance the security of the region. Port security grant funding has been used to procure equipment such as vessels, vehicles, install detection systems such as cameras and sensors, and provide equipment and maintenance for systems recently installed. It also provides funding for 24/7 response and patrols. For example, at my port, the Port of Boston, we use port security grant funds to bolster our critical infrastructure by obtaining and installing radar intrusion detection systems, cameras, biometric access control and identification systems, active shooter detection systems, and cybersecurity assessment tools. We've enhanced our emergency management and response capabilities by equipping our bomb squads with explosive ordnance disposal robots, advanced X-ray systems, bomb containment vessels, and preventative radiological and nuclear detection devices. As chairman of the AAPA Security Committee, I know that ports around the country have also utilized these funds to confront the multitude of physical and cybersecurity vulnerabilities that challenge the vitality of the maritime transportation network. At the Port of Los Angeles, for example, port security grant funding has gone to installing over 400 cameras and 250 access control panels, including infrared camera capable of viewing objects 3 miles from the port of entry. Building a cybersecurity operations center to monitor and respond to over 550,000 monthly internet attacks on the port's business network. In Florida, the Tampa Port Authority have used port security grants to purchase an innovative floating barrier system that was designed and manufactured in Florida. The system is designed to prevent a waterborne attack by a small vessel carrying an improvised explosive device. This system can be deployed in less than an hour by port security and law enforcement personnel, as compared to the traditional systems deployed by contractors. They take hours or days to set up. Channels under the jurisdiction of the Port Authority are used to deliver over 43% of all motor vehicle fuel used by Florida's citizens and visitors. This investment has the potential to protect high-value targets against evolving threats of improvised waterborne explosive carried by small vessels. Security challenges are never stagnant. Cybersecurity is a prime example of an emerging security threat since 9/11. Ports are working with their stakeholders in addressing this very complex problem. And the Port Security Grant Program remains a vital component in assisting ports in addressing cybersecurity challenges by providing resources for cyber assessments. If Congress were to make tweaks to the FEMA Port Security Grant Program, as has been discussed by other committees of jurisdiction, we would recommend the following. Fund and authorize the Port Security Grant Program at the $400 million level or maintain the current $100 million level. Increase the $100 million project limit to $5 million per project limit, and increasing the limit on cost eligible for funding would address the cost of acquisition and installation, as well as the sustainment and maintenance of security equipment and systems that have increased since the authorization of 2005. This would address most of the multi-year funding issues that have been raised in the past as well. A 36-month grant performance period is the minimum needed for ports to successfully design, implement, and test projects to ensure maximum improvements to port security and operational capability. We encourage Congress to continue to emphasize a risk-based funding strategy for port security grants. The Port Security Grant Program funding should be focused on the highest risk ports in the nation in terms of consequence, vulnerability, and economic impact. Reduce or eliminate the 25% cost match required for government entities such as port authorities, police departments, and fire agencies. And keep the Port Security Grant Program where it is. Do not block grant or consolidate this program. FEMA has done an excellent job in administering this program. Port security grants are managed quite differently than other Homeland Security grants. Priorities are set locally based on risk and vulnerability at the local port. Other Homeland Security grants have a list of core capabilities which all grantees try to attain. This capability list is based more on a movable and shared asset rather than set facilities. There is no such list of core capabilities for port security grants, and the ones developed for other grant programs were not developed with ports in mind. Additionally, ports have certain federal mandates, such as the Transportation Worker ID Card, or the TWIC program, and the recently released TWIC Reader Rule, which goes into effect this coming year. Additionally, I would be remiss if I did not state that funding Customs and Border Protection and ensuring that ports are staffed with a sufficient level of Customs and Border Protection officers is critical for a safe and secure supply chain. CBP officers augment everything that Port Security Grant Program does. In fiscal year 2015, when Customs and Border Protection was funded to hire 2,000 staff, fewer than 20 officers were assigned to the seaports. We cannot let this disproportionate approach to security continue. Our nation's seaports handle more than 11 million maritime containers, over 11 million international passengers each year. Finally, we have made remarkable, well-prepared industry when it comes to security. As a security professional, we value the partnerships. We leverage funding and keep security as a priority. The FEMA Port Security Grant Program has been vital in keeping our ports and supply chains and communities safe. I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Martinuska, you can begin. Yeah, put your mic on.
Before I start my comments, Chairman Barletta, I want to thank you for your kind words of condolences from my brother, Denny DeVoe, and I'll make sure that I pass those along to all of his brothers in Harrisburg. Thank you. My name is Art Martinuska. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania Professional Firefighters Association. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today on behalf of the International Association of Firefighters, representing over 300,000 firefighters and emergency medical personnel. Today's fire service has evolved from a municipal force whose primary duty was to extinguish local fires to a highly integrated national system that responds to a wide range of local emergencies and national disasters. When the nation faces any type of emergency, it is local firefighters who respond. It's from this unique perspective that we view the federal government's preparedness efforts. The horrific events of September 11, 2001 shook our nation to the core, and Congress responded appropriately by creating the Department of Homeland Security and establishing new programs to protect the nation. These laws fundamentally altered the way our nation views emergency response and preparedness. Before 9/11, the federal role in emergency management was largely confined to recovery after a major disaster. September 11th forced us to face the deficiencies of this outmoded view and create a new paradigm among federal, state, and local governments to better protect our communities. Under this partnership, local emergency responders came to understand that their job is not merely protecting communities from local incidents, but to play an integral role in protecting all Americans against terrorist attacks and other major disasters. The federal government's role in this new partnership is twofold. First, it must be able to marshal all available resources, including the assets offered by the nation's fire services, to respond to these events. And second, to fulfill this obligation, the federal government must be willing to ensure that local emergency response agencies have the resources they need to successfully execute their missions. To successfully mitigate a broad palette of operational responsibilities, the fire service must maintain a continuous state of preparedness. Unfortunately, firefighters are too often expected to work with outdated equipment, minimal training, and insufficient personnel. The SAFER and Fire Grant programs were created by Congress to help address these needs and keep firefighters and fire departments in an ever-ready state of preparedness. Providing funds to communities nationwide, SAFER and Fire have proved to be highly effective. For example, the Philadelphia Fire Department has struggled for years with a depleted fire force. In 2015, I'm pleased to say that the Philadelphia Fire Department received a SAFER grant for $22.6 million, allowing the department to add 160 firefighters to the depleted roles, enhancing safety and significantly reducing risk. Despite the clear improvements in preparedness produced by these grants, there remains a strong need for additional funding. According to the National Fire Protection Association, shortages in personnel, equipment, and training persist in many fire departments. Although SAFER and Fire have allowed fire departments to make headway against long-standing shortages, many departments are swimming against a rising tide. In addition to SAFER and Fire, we believe the Homeland Security grants, particularly the Urban Area Security Initiative and the State Homeland Security Grant Program, have benefited the nation's preparedness. Although these programs serve an important public safety need, shrinking budgets limit their effectiveness. We are concerned with this trend and warn that if continued, it will have a significant impact on preparedness. Additionally, the previous administration proposed consolidating Homeland Security grants. We rejected this proposal, as did Congress. Given the limited federal funding afforded to the grants, merging district Homeland Security priorities into a single block grant could cause such priorities to go unserved. We hope this proposal is not resurrected under the current administration and urge it be rejected again if it is. As you know, the National Urban Search and Rescue Response System provides a significant national resource for search and rescue assistance in the wake of a major disaster. USAR teams have been deployed to numerous disasters in the United States, including Superstorm Sandy, Hurricane Katrina, and of course the 9/11 attacks. I know this subcommittee values the significant work of our nation's USAR teams, and I would be remiss if I did not thank you for your work last year to pass the National Urban Search and Rescue Response System Act. This legislation is a significant achievement by this subcommittee, and we appreciate your tireless efforts that resulted in this bill becoming law. Unfortunately, the USAR system is desperately underfunded and becomes more so each year. In 2006, FEMA estimated the annual reoccurring cost for each task force to be $1.7 million. Today, in many jurisdictions, the cost exceeds $2 million. For fiscal year 2016, Congress only appropriated a portion of the necessary costs for all 28 teams, leaving local sponsoring agencies to pick up the remainder of the tab. Unfortunately, tight local budgets have left many local sponsoring agencies unable to subsidize critical USAR functions, significantly straining task forces' readiness and capabilities. In fact, some teams have been so underfunded that they have been unable to respond to emergencies when called upon. Additionally, when local communities are forced to assume an ever-increasing share of costs, funds are inevitably diverted from local emergency service budgets. Thus, a failure to fund an inherently federal function actually detracts from local preparedness. Adequately funding the Urban Search and Rescue Response System would significantly improve our nation's readiness. A small investment would yield significant returns in ensuring that teams are prepared to conduct critical, life-saving search and rescue operations in the wake of a disaster. These programs allow all the federal government to enhance preparedness at both a local and national level. That is why we are concerned with reports that funding for Homeland Security grants and other priorities within DHS may be cut under the new administration's budget. As the first line of defense in protecting our homeland, the federal government has an inherent responsibility to help ensure local fire departments can effectively protect the public safety. Cutting these essential programs would surely result in critical gaps in the firefighters' ability to respond to emergencies. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you our views on the National Preparedness System. We have made significant progress since 9/11 to enhance readiness and capabilities. We must continue to build upon this framework and resist suggestions to cut or underfund programs that are essential to our national security and well-being. Again, thank you for the subcommittee's opportunity to have me testify here today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Marnuska. Mr. Roberts, if I could remind the panel to try to stay within the 5 minutes. We've got a large panel and some questions we want to get to, but thank you very much.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Begin.
Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Barletta and Ranking Member Johnson and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to share my agency's views on the importance on FEMA preparedness grants in securing Las Vegas. My name is Tom Roberts. I'm an assistant sheriff with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I currently oversee the Law Enforcement Investigations and Support Group and have been in law enforcement for over 30 years. Metro is the largest law enforcement agency in the state of Nevada with over 3,000 sworn members, and we serve a population of 2 million permanent residents and 42 million visitors each year. As one of the largest police agencies in the United States, we are also a member of two important professional law enforcement organizations, the Major County Sheriffs of America and the Major City Chiefs Association. With the ever-changing threat environment, the capabilities have built in part through UASI and state homeland funds have become critical in our preparedness and for our efforts to prevent threats to public safety. These capabilities are consistently supported by our local governments and our state. The federal contribution to those efforts is small in comparison, but is essential to maintain the level of vigilance against threats. One of our major accomplishments made possible by the State Homeland and UASC grants is the development and sustainment of the Southern Nevada Counterterrorism Center, our state-designated fusion center. And Chairman Barletta, I'd like to thank you for your support for fusion centers across the country, to include ours. Metro does not source any grant funding for full-time employee positions or overtime reimbursement. Staff assigned to the fusion center are contributed by each partner agency in their own expense. The mission of the SNTCC is to combat crime and terrorism in Nevada by ensuring communication and coordination among federal, state, local, tribal, international, and private sector agencies. The Fusion Center links Homeland Security stakeholders in Southern Nevada through information sharing and analysis. With the SNCTC are several successful programs supporting in part by investments of both Homeland Security and UASC funding, whether technology, equipment, or training. The SNCTC participates in a nationwide suspicious activity reporting, SAR, initiative, which is a cornerstone of the national network of fusion centers. The initiative provides law enforcement at all levels with the ability to detect and prevent terrorism and other criminal activity while strictly abiding by privacy, civil liberties, and civil rights protections. The counterterrorism section is comprised of law enforcement detectives throughout the Las Vegas Valley. It is a true actionable arm of the Fusion Center. They are a 24/7 operation that runs 7 days a week, day or night, to ensure that nothing is missed and that our community remains ever vigilant in the fight against terrorism. We use grant dollars to support Silver Shield, which is Nevada's critical infrastructure protection program and implements the National Infrastructure Protection Plan, NIP, in our area. Having initially formed with the mandate to conduct physical security assessments in critical infrastructure and key resource sites, the program has evolved to identify and prioritize and assess risk regarding infrastructure, assets, systems, networks, and functions that are critical to the state's economic security as well as public health and safety. The UASC program, while critical and effective, needs to be strengthened to keep pace with the current the current threat environment and to fulfill its original intent. In any given year, high-risk and high-consequence areas like Las Vegas are left out of UASC grant allocation. There needs to be a reevaluation of the MSA risk formula to accurately reflect true count of approved critical infrastructure locations within the MSA by taking into consideration the clustering of critical infrastructure and key resources. Special events need to be factored into the calculation on how cities are targeted. No one does special events like Las Vegas, and taking DHS special event assessment rating listings only increase the true account of the risk to the MSA risk profile. We would like to see FEMA provide clear guidance as to what contributes to the threat category within the MSA process instead of existing process, which in some cases does not appear to be accountable. There remains a strong need for law enforcement terrorism prevention activities, LETPA, requirement that is current law under provisions. 25% of all UASC and state homeland security grant funds that are received by a state must be used for prevention activities. In this requirement, if this requirement was removed or otherwise watered down, there would be zero dedicated federal support for terrorism prevention activities, which is a unique role in law enforcement. It would significantly reduce the amount of funding available to support our Fusion Center and true counterterrorism efforts. On a related note, we believe there should be more formal local law enforcement input into FEMA's grant guidance and prioritization process to ensure transparency in its policy, directives, grant guidance, and risk formulas. I want to thank the committee and all the staff for your hard work and willingness to engage local law enforcement. As you can see, we have built a very important capabilities with these programs, and we look forward to working with you to protect them. I look forward to any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts, for your testimony. Mr. Daroff, you may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Barletta, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to participate in today's hearing. It is an honor to be here today. My name is William Daroff. I am the Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Director of the Washington Office of the Jewish Federations of North America. And I take note of my colleague Robert Goldberg and my wife Heidi, who are here with me today. JFNA and our 148 Jewish federations across the country are collectively among the top 10 charities in the nation. Since September 11th, nonprofits in general and Jewish communal institutions in particular have been targeted by international terrorist organizations and homegrown violent extremists from across the ideological spectrum. As a consequence, Jewish communal security and that of the nonprofit sector more generally has great relevance to the national preparedness system. In August of 2016, the National Counterterrorism Center reported that homegrown violent extremists are increasingly favoring softer civilian targets, including Jewish houses of worship, because they are perceived to have lower levels of security and because they are being encouraged directly by overseas violent extremists such as ISIL. In February, the Southern Poverty Law Center reported that the number of hate groups in the United States rose in 2016 from 892 to 917, and the majority of these groups are anti-Semitic. Since January 1st, at least 116 Jewish communal institutions, including Jewish community centers, Jewish day schools, places of worship, and others, have received more than 160 bomb threats in 39 states. Again, that's just since January 1st of this year, and I would note that those threats include in each of the states that are represented by members of the committee who are present here today. In fiscal year 2005, in response to these threats, Congress, with bipartisan support, created the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. The program supports the acquisition and installation of physical target hardening measures to protect against threats identified of particular concern to at-risk nonprofit institutions, including protection against explosive devices, arson, active shooters, assassination, kidnapping, chemical and biological agents, and cyber attacks. Prior to the establishment of the NSGP program, there was no committed, coordinated, uniform, centralized program that responded to, promoted, or ensured that at-risk nonprofit institutions participated in and benefited from meaningful federal, state, and local security efforts. The NSGP program changed this. The NSGP program awards protect against threats and mitigate the effects of attacks, including the installation of access controls, barriers, blast-proofing, monitoring and surveillance capabilities, and cybersecurity enhancements. These are similar in nature to the physical security enhancements acquired and installed at federal government buildings in the post-9/11 environment, such as those protecting the Capitol and those protecting the building that we are in this morning. The program is competitive and risk-based. It involves state and local review and prioritization, followed by federal review and final determination by DHS. The program applies the same geographic limitations as FEMA's Urban Area Security Initiative, which as of FY 2016 included 29 urban areas in 20 specified states and here in the District of Columbia. The Nonprofit Security Grant Program has become an essential component of the preparedness grant programs at FEMA. It maintains bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate and is thought of as an efficient and effective means to accomplish a great deal of security enhancement and preparedness using modest resources. With continuing and growing record of threats, attempted attacks, and deadly occurrences targeting Jewish communal institutions, as well as to other vulnerable populations within the nonprofit sector, we believe there is ample justification for Congress to maintain the Nonprofit Security Grant Program as a singular standalone initiative as a matter of national security preparedness, and Congress should consider ways to strengthen the program, not to dismantle it. Conversely, we strongly believe that any effort to replace the NSGP program as part of a consolidation of larger preparedness grant programs with disenfranchised nonprofit stakeholders, which could not be expected to meaningfully participate in or effectively compete with larger, more formidable and connected stakeholders for resources at an integrative, competitive process. Such a move would dilute the connectivity and continuity between local stakeholders and the state administrative agencies and between FEMA and national stakeholders such as JF&A. Rather, in addition to maintaining the integrity of the NSGP program in current form, we know that the threats to our communal institutions have expanded geographically to smaller and more diffuse communities outside of UASI areas. As such, we believe there is a need for Congress to take immediate action to further strengthen the integration of nonprofit preparedness within state and local preparedness activities. To this end, we would welcome the subcommittee exploring other opportunities to build nonprofit security capabilities through the national preparedness system. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the importance of the Nonprofit Security Grant Program as a standalone initiative and the imperative to strengthen the ability and opportunities for further integration of nonprofit preparedness within the national preparedness system. I look forward to the opportunity to answer questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Feinstein, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Barletta, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to testify today regarding FEMA's nonprofit security grant program. My name is Michael Feinstein, and I am the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Bender JCC located in Rockville, Maryland. The Bender JCC is a warm, inclusive, diverse, and thriving community that welcomes everyone to participate in our programs, people of all backgrounds, faiths, ethnicities, abilities, and sexual orientations. We serve a cross-section of the area's population from young mothers with infants to seniors who are 100 years old. Tens of thousands of people participate in our cultural, educational, recreational, social, and safety net programs annually. Daily, there are over 400 children in our preschool, after-school, and enrichment programs, and in the summer, over 500 children and 250 counselors participate in our inclusive day camp, with about 100 of these children having some type of disability. We provide arts and culture programs, lectures, fitness and aquatics classes, and Jewish festivals and holiday celebrations to the broad community. We help seniors age in place through a hot lunch and social program and a community-based Parkinson's Wellness Initiative in partnership with Georgetown University Medical Center. And we serve as a resource to the entire community by providing meeting rooms and theater space to hundreds of nonprofits in need of free or inexpensive program and performance space, and by serving as a public polling place for elections. As a symbolic institution in the National Capital Region, representing the highly recognized JCC brand and serving the broad community, the Bender JCC faces a range of security threats. We are directly affected by any and all incitement of violence against Jews and anti-Semitic rhetoric and actions locally, nationally, and abroad. Immediately after 9/11, a comprehensive threat assessment and security analysis identified a number of security vulnerabilities, deemed that the JCC to be a high visibility profile target, and assessed the threat to our facility as high. This assessment became reality several years ago when law enforcement alerted us to a credible threat against our institution after picking up chatter that targeted JCCs in our region. Following the shooting at the Kansas City JCC almost 3 years ago, we undertook another security review which identified additional operational security vulnerabilities. Today, we face a new threat of terrorism against our institution as a result of the recent spate of bomb threats against JCCs and other Jewish institutions across the country, including 2 that have targeted our facility since January. These events forced the evacuation and sweeps of our building, disrupting our operations. As a result, we are again forced to further evaluate what capital investments may be required to enhance our security against emerging threats, and expect that we will need to seek further NSGP resources in the next available grant cycle. FEMA's nonprofit security grant program has provided critical security resources to the Bender JCC. Based on the recommendations of multiple security analyses, the NSGP resources have enabled us to create layers of security through deterrence and hardening of our facility, including investments in fencing, gates, bollards, security cameras, bomb-proofing, and an integrated emergency communication system. We could not have afforded all of these security enhancements on our own, and we have used the grant program to leverage other grant and private funding. The Bender JCC has had an extremely positive experience with the National Capital Regional State Administrative Agency in D.C. They announce and roll out the program in a timely fashion, provide helpful briefings that explain the proposal items in detail, and they are the go-to people with any questions or clarification needed during the period of performance. They have been great stewards of the program, providing guidance to ensure the application process, oversight and compliance requirements, and project closeout procedures were in order and satisfied. With respect to considerations for consolidation, we would be extremely concerned if the program were to be decentralized, with nonprofits competing with multiple state and local law enforcement, firefighters, port and transit security, and other emergency responders for FEMA preparedness grants. We believe that we would find ourselves at a severe competitive disadvantage against these larger entities and would lose the level of attention and cooperation we currently have with the state administrative agency that has made our experience with the NSGP program successful. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. And I'll begin the first round of questions, limited to 5 minutes for each member. If there are any additional questions following the first round, we'll have additional rounds of questions as needed. Mr. Daroff and Mr. Feinstein, thank you so much for agreeing to be a witness at today's hearing. I personally asked for you two to participate because the threats we are seeing at Jewish community centers across the country, like the Bender Community Center here in Washington, are outrageous and unacceptable. This is a domestic terrorism, and the full force of the law needs to be brought against the perpetrators. In addition to federal, state, and local law enforcement support, I know some of the community centers receive assistance from the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. Are these funds helpful in combating these threats? And what else can be done, because I know that these threats are real?
So first, thank you for your statement of support, Mr. Chairman. These funds have been critical for us. We raise money every year for our own security needs, both for capital and operating expenses, yet we could not raise enough money on our own, and these grants make a tremendous difference for our JCC and other JCCs. You can imagine currently, with over 87 JCCs receiving bomb threats from across the country since January, my colleagues and I come into work every single day wondering whether we will be evacuating infants, toddlers, and seniors as a result of these threats. I would expect that many of my colleagues would welcome the opportunity to participate in this program, which may require actually expanding those who are available to participate while maintaining the integrity of the program.
Mr. Chairman, thank you as well. I would just add that that I just received an alert that 3 more JCCs have received bomb threats as we sit here. One thing that we can look at is looking at ways that, structural ways, that can enable smaller communities that are located outside of UASI program could benefit from these types of security grant programs. As my colleague Michael has said, he's here to build Jewish community, to help us work out and build a stronger self and stronger bodies, not to be a security director. And so the assistance that the federal government has been able to provide, as well as local law enforcement, has been essential. But if you could expand the program in a way that doesn't diminish the resources, that would be at the top of our list of things that Congress could do to show its solidarity.
Thank you. As I said in my opening statement, fire grants have been essential to numerous fire departments in my district back home. Mr. Martinuska, can you highlight how the assistance to firefighter grants can be particularly helpful to smaller rural departments, and how those departments can use these federal funds to build upon and leverage local support?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The basic tenets of fire protection are supported by these grants. In some of our smaller rural departments, if these grants weren't available, these departments would go out of existence. So their existence is dependent with just the basic needs of turnout gear, self-contained breathing apparatus, fire engines, just the effort to survive. These grants, if they would be diminished, would cause them to go out of business.
Thank you. Mr. Crossley, as you know, an all hazards plan starts with a threat assessment. When it comes to cyber security and the threat posed to the electrical grid, are you receiving clear guidance from FEMA and DHS as to what you should be planning for? Unfortunately, in talking with local governments, my sense is that they are not being told what to plan for. Should you be planning for the power to be out for 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months? What should our communities be prepared for if the grid goes down for a significant period of time, leaving hospitals, water and sewer systems, and other infrastructure without power?
First of all, we are planning for those things. So we do our own threat assessment. We do our own hazard assessment with guidance from the state, from FEMA, and we identify both cybersecurity, electrical failure. I just participated in a FEMA has run regional power outage exercises. So I was actually just at Ohio EMA participating in one of those. And I think that it's really threefold. So we need to talk to citizens, which we do, as much as possible without overwhelming them. Then we need to talk to our partners in the local community in the region to say, depending on the size and the scope of the outage, how would we get resources in. We work with in our case, Duke Energy, on how is the system being protected, how are you ensuring that you can get the crews in here, and then we work through the state and through FEMA and the Emergency Management Assistance Compact to ensure that, provided the entire country is not without power, that we know how we're going to get resources from the other states. So you're taking it from the citizen preparedness to ensuring that whatever system we develop in Hamilton County is coordinated regionally. We're on a tri-state area, so we talk to Kentucky and we talk to Indiana as well. And then, of course, we work through Ohio EMA to work with FEMA. So I think that, again, the benefit of the national preparedness system, as I stated, is that it's not just where the boots are on the ground at the local level, all disasters are local, but that we need to work with regionally, with our state, and through our state with FEMA and the neighboring states so that we can bring resources in. And these programs help ensure that we have a national response system. So we identify the hazard, we identify how we're going to deal with the mass care issues, with the feeding issues, with the sheltering issues, and then we make sure that while we may not be able to purchase and warehouse everything in Hamilton County, that we know who we can call and we keep people and we continue to test and exercise those systems. So we are actually following former Administrator Fugate's mantra, which was don't plan for what you think you can handle, plan for what you think you can't handle, and start talking to people about how you would handle that.
I'm going to put my mayor's hat back on here for a moment, and I still believe my experience has been in talking with local officials, especially smaller cities, that we need to do a better job in communicating with them, because they're going to be carrying the football when the lights go out and the power goes down. Mm-hmm. Nobody's coming to help when we have a massive outage. It's the local government that's going to be responsible, and loss of life will happen in the first 24, 48, 72 hours. And I still don't get a sense that communication, many of these mayors, the first thing I ask is, well, if this happens, how long are you going to need to be prepared for it? They can't answer. So if you don't know how long you need to be prepared for it, you can't be prepared.
So we always use the 3-day mantra, to be prepared for 3 days. Our challenge, and this is challenge not just in Ohio, but across the country. For example, Hamilton County has 49 individual jurisdictions, all at various sizes and capabilities. Everything from the city of Cincinnati, which is a large city, to cities of a few hundred people. So you're right. So a lot of mayors are not necessarily aware. So we actually work across the spectrum. It's an ongoing educational process. So you're always going to run across elected and appointed officials who they either depend on somebody else to know how that's going to happen, or they're not as educated. And so, you ask, what is the benefit of the grants? The benefit of the grants, for example, with EMPG, is with the 50-50 hard dollar match, it provides skin in the game from the local government, but also that we're out there on a daily basis knocking on these doors. But when you're at the local level and you have limited staff capacity, you're hitting 1 and 2 at a time. So I think that you're right in that a lot of them don't know what they're going to do. And also the buck does stop with them. So I have 49 individual mayors or township trustee presidents or whatever it is. So little by little, we're knocking on those doors and we're talking about those issues, albeit in a manageable manner. And then at the county level and working with the state, we focus on the catastrophic issues. Because to be honest with you, when you start talking catastrophic to a small community, it can become quite overwhelming, which is why we need that system that can expand and contract as needed.
Yeah. Thank you. Chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. DeFazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been at several other events this morning. I regret I wasn't here for the opening statements. I'll make a brief one and then have a quick question. I've looked at the president's proposal in the so-called skinny budget, for disaster, it's a disaster. And I guess down at the White House have either got amnesia or no sense of history. We're going to go back to the "you're doing a great job" Brownie days, as if we don't remember what it's like when we aren't prepared. To cut 25% of the budget for preparedness grants, to cut the pre-disaster mitigation funds, that's whistling through the graveyard. Not going to be any more floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. Don't worry about it. And by the way, don't call the federal government because we won't be there, and oh yeah, your local first responders won't have been trained and they won't have the equipment they need. Otherwise, it's a really great idea. And this is also, we can build a Maginot Line, a wall, so-called, or fence now on the Mexican border. You know, I was in Hong Kong when we still had communist China and the Brits controlled Hong Kong. They had double fencing 20 feet tall. They used lethal force. It had concertina wire, barbed wire, and you could pay a smuggler $1,000 and they'd get you over it in 90 seconds with the ladder contraption they invented. And people came over regularly. But we're going to build a wall or fence through the Superstition Mountains in Arizona, and don't worry, no one will throw drugs over it. Nobody will sneak through it, under it, around it. It's absolutely nuts. But we're going to cut real preparedness to do this. So just one question, since we have a group of people here. I just ask this. Do you think it makes sense to cut the multi-hazard mitigation program when we have the Congressional Budget Office and the Multi-Hazard Mitigation Council saying we save $3 to $4 post-disaster for every dollar we invest? And if you don't think that's an accurate figure and we should cut that budget, let me know. So does anybody want to advocate for cutting that budget and say it'll make us more efficient? Ms. Smith-Reed?
No,
Oh,
I
okay.
would not cut the budget on mitigation. Actually, if we're really going to bend this federal runaway cost curve on disasters, we really need to move away from the current reactive model to a more proactive model. And that means shifting dollars to pre-disaster mitigation, our ability to buy down risk and infuse resiliency within the communities at the local level. That is what is going to support and sustain local jurisdictions more than the reactive model that we have currently in place. So to your point, between fiscal year 2011 and 2014, the federal government allocated roughly $222 million for pre-disaster mitigation compared to $3.2 billion for post-disaster mitigation, which is a ratio of roughly 1 to 14. So, you know, in the aftermath of hurricanes and other large-scale events that we've seen, you can see, based on the photographs that we see in the media, where good mitigation pre-disaster has been applied because you have structures that have withstood the forces that they were up against. So that alone is clear demonstration of a why we need to buy down risk within those high hazard areas of our community and repurpose some of those areas. So if it's moving homes out of the floodplain and to higher ground and repurposing that space and give it back to the community in a different way through park systems or whatever the case may be. That's an example of one thing that Arizona has done, where we bought out a community and moved them to higher ground and gave that space back for the community to use, and they got to decide on what that looked like for the future for their community. So I personally would be encouraging, and I know other state directors also echo this comment, that in order for us to buy down risk, we do need to have more mitigation dollars prior to an event.
Great, excellent. I only have 20 seconds left. Anybody disagree? Okay, no one disagreed. Let the record reflect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Bost for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to serve on this committee. It's kind of a committee that's near and dear to my heart. Mr. Martinez, he and I have something in common. We're both been, I'm one of the only members of the Congress that was professional firefighter. And so that means we get to do those things that our mother would prefer we didn't do, which is running into buildings other people are running out of, being around fire, spraying water, getting dirty, and then people like seeing us there. It's pretty, yeah, it was a pretty neat profession. Thank you for your service in that. Let me ask, if I can, Mr. Lawless, as we're moving forward, and what would you say is the most significant accomplishments that have, for preparedness, that have been able to occur with leveraging federal dollars since we started these projects?
Thank you, Mr. Bost. Our most impressive accomplishment in preparedness has been around the country the creation of safe, secure, and resilient maritime facilities that meet all of the federal security requirements facing port authorities. We've done that by leveraging the use of port security grants. We've created a layered system of security that begins with fences, cameras, identification systems, access control, radiological nuclear detection devices. We've done that. We've trained all of our port workers in security awareness. We do regular drills with all of our other agencies, our fire departments, our EMS service, our police departments, our emergency management agencies. A lot of that has come from funding from the port security grant programs. So I would say the overall impact of the port security grant program has been to really create these safe and secure and resilient maritime facilities that will support the maritime transportation network, which is vital to our U.S. economy.
So now that we have it in place, what type of investment or how do we wisely invest so that we can maintain that? What type of breakdowns do you see? What concerns might be out there?
Well, the challenge moving forward I see is how do we maintain our current levels of preparedness? How do we maintain and improve that layered system of security? And I think the Port Security Grant Program is vital to that. A lot of the systems that we've purchased, a lot of the training that we've done now has to be recycled. A lot of the systems that we've bought have come to the end of use for their usability. And in order to maintain that level of security, we have to either replace those or upgrade those systems. And again, as the workforce changes within the port community and more stakeholders come in, firefighters retire and new firefighters come in, police officers retire, new police officers come in, new threats evolve, whether they be physical threats or cybersecurity threats. We need those funds to get that workforce ready, to get our equipment ready to meet those challenges.
Okay, thank you. Just for the panel in general, and I'm going to hope to get through this, but what do you see? Let me tell you that whether it is for a man-made disaster or a national disaster, we've got to be in a position of preparedness. I come from a very unique area in the fact that in 1925, my hometown was virtually destroyed in a tornado, and because of that is why we have the early warning systems as far as tornado. So that was the early process as we tried to do this emergency preparedness. So my question, and it's going to be difficult because but are we to a point where we need to be? And if not, what do we need to do to get there at a quicker rate? Yes, ma'am. That's a big question, I know, and just kind of throw it out there.
That is a big question. So I think one of the things that we can look at, and there's always opportunities to evaluate a process, especially after it's been ongoing for a certain period of time. So if we look at the threat hazard identification and risk assessment and the state preparedness report process that feeds up into the national preparedness report, looking at the timing that we have for analysis is too short. So the 12-month time frame, by the time you're awarding grants based on the previous year's risk assessment, those grants are just in process, and then you have to immediately turn around and reevaluate your risk level. So there's not enough time for practical application to demonstrate growth and diminishing those gaps that we recognized in the previous year. That also, by moving that timeline a bit, will also allow for greater participation at the local level. Because as you noted, many communities are diverse. Within the state of Arizona, we have some very large urban centers, but we have a lot of rural communities that we serve equally. And so ensuring that we are recognizing their challenges, their gaps, where their risks lie, it's going to be vastly different than the urban areas that we also serve. So by taking that process, taking another look at how we do that, and being a bit more methodical and concentrating on the needs for rural Arizona in equal to those urban areas, I think is a way for us to move that forward.
My time has expired, so I'll yield back, but I will probably follow up with the rest of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Ranking Member Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Smith-Reeve, in your written statement, you discuss a proposal to combine all of the preparedness grants into one program. Congress has rejected past administration proposals to do the same thing. How does NEMA's proposal differ from past administration proposals, if at all?
So there was
and
different.
Also, how will combining all of those grants lead to more effective spending by states and local governments on preparedness activities?
Thank you for your question. My apologies for the interruption. So with regard to what NEMA, our voting members had put together and proposed to FEMA was a consolidation. And what was submitted forward from FEMA was different than what was proposed by NEMA. And I think there were some things that were lost in translation, because I guarantee that those to my left are probably opposed to what we submitted and proposed as far as consolidation of grants. The intent with our message was to give greater flexibility to all of the parties that are represented within a state's boundaries. So by combining the suite of grants, it would allow a state to go through the threat hazard identification and risk assessment, define where their biggest risk areas are, and then allow them to determine where they're spending their grant dollars. So by combining the grants, what you're combining are the facets of each. So you're not limiting a jurisdiction to only spending a certain amount of money on ports, only spending a certain amount of money on the urban area, only spending a certain amount of money on fill in the blank. It allows that jurisdiction to collectively determine where their highest risk areas are and allow them to determine what funding is required for that.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the other panelists have an opinion on the issue of combining preparedness grants?
Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson. With the continuing and growing record of threats, attempted attacks, and deadly occurrences targeting Jewish communal institutions, as well as other vulnerable populations within the nonprofit sector, we believe there's ample justification for Congress to maintain the Nonprofit Security Grant Program as a singular standalone initiative as a matter of national security preparedness, and Congress should consider ways to strengthen the program rather than dismantle it. We believe that consolidating the program would disenfranchise at-risk nonprofit stakeholders who are not able to meaningfully participate in or effectively compete with larger, more formidable and connected stakeholders for resources in an integrated competitive process. So we strongly believe that keeping the programs separate and segregated serves the interests of the country as well as those of at-risk nonprofits.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir, Mr. Lawless.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. By reducing the grants, we're totally opposed to making those block grants, but by reducing those grants and combining these grants into block grants, in our situation, the ports would be forced to compete with other interests, both on the state level and local level, for those crucial and vital funds. We are international borders. We're ports of entry. We are rigidly defined by federal regulations, and we are forced to comply with federal directives and federal mandates that are usually unfunded. So to meet those unfunded mandates, the Port Security Grant Program has been essential to our success in securing our ports.
Well, Mr. Lawless, if the Port Security Grant Program is cut as proposed by the Trump administration, will the ports be able to pick up the slack in funding and maintain current levels of security?
Our position is no, we would like to maintain the current level, if not go back to the $400 million that was originally appropriated in 2005 that has allowed us to secure our ports and to keep the maritime transportation working in a secure, safe, and a resilient fashion. So, no, we are opposed to the 40% cut in port security grant funds.
All right, I thank you. My time is out, and I yield back.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Graves for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all of you for being here today. Ms. Smith-Reeves, I have a question for you. I'm from South Louisiana and had the unfortunate opportunity to ride out Katrina, Hurricanes Gustav and Ike in 2008, Hurricane Isaac in 2012, record high water in the Mississippi River system in 2011, and a number of other disasters. One trend that I see throughout these disasters, and let me actually make note, probably one of the more profound ones, in addition to Katrina, was the August floods, where we had just had a 1,000-year flood in my hometown. It's not government that often comes in and actually serves as the first responder. And I want to be clear, our firefighters and wildlife and fisheries agents and others, police officers, have been remarkable. But you look at the number of officers and firefighters and others we have compared to the number of people affected in some of these major disasters, the public plays a huge role. All of these planning efforts, in many cases, seem to, I guess, lack or avoid the role that the public plays and the capacity that they bring to the table. I'm just curious at your sort of 50,000-foot level take on the role of individuals and how you best see to use that capability and free asset in disaster response and preparation.
Thank you for that question, and you're right in that the public to whom we all serve are typically the first responders in any type of event, because we encourage them not only to be prepared to support themselves, their families, but also their neighbors and others within their community. So efforts to train, inform, and educate are critical, and I think we seek out many opportunities to do that. One way that I think we could do a better job is, and to really shift the visibility and elevate our level of preparedness within the members of our community, is to get into the schools and start educating the youth in our community, because those are going to be the future for this nation. And by educating them and informing them on how important it is to enhance their personal preparedness level and ways to support their community in community preparedness, will build resiliency within the nation.
Mr. Crossley, would you care to comment on that at all, just the role that you see just a private citizen playing in disaster response?
So one of the phrases I commonly use when I talk to citizen groups is there are 2,000 of us and 800,000 of you. So we actively engage, and so a lot of this is done at the local level when you're talking about engaging the citizens and helping with the disaster response and recovery. And so myself and many of my counterparts across the country, we use the former or current Citizen Corps program, the Community Emergency Response Team concept, and then we work a lot through the voluntary organizations. So there's almost a group for everybody that they can affiliate with. And so we work with our community members to develop spontaneous volunteer plans. We both do it virtually through 211 and 311 to make sure that they're engaged and know where the volunteer opportunities are, because we like people to be engaged. So you don't want people just randomly showing up and doing, in your case, flood remediation. So I've done flood remediation in Slidell in 1996, if you remember that flood. And so what we do is, from the planning perspective, we start to work with our community partners, because that way you keep it organized, the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, the various religious groups. We're doing a big effort right now with our Jewish Community Center. And so we work with them to accept volunteers. We develop the structure under which they can operate, and then during a disaster, one of our first goals is to get that information out there. Here's how you can help. And so I agree with you that it's critical, and it's the only way that the few thousand government employees are going to be able to serve, as Chairman Barletta asked, how are you going to handle the masses in a disaster? So I think that is, and that's been supported under the National Preparedness System, to develop those plans, to develop those procedures, And that's where myself and many of my colleagues are going on the local level, because at the end of the day, I'm the face to the public, along with the Board of County Commissioners, that says, how are you responding to this disaster? So we're putting that in place.
Very quickly, so I just want to make sure I understand. So you actually, in a very dynamic environment of a disaster, you actually adapt your volunteer efforts to that particular disaster and begin communicating with constituents or with citizens about how they can assist and what they can do to assist? Is that?
Yes, you have to. Otherwise, they will do it anyway.
They will.
So we want to coordinate both financial donations as well as physical donations and then donations of time. So we put these plans and procedures in place, and we work with our voluntary partners to help corral that and send it where it's needed based on our damage assessments and our long-term recovery needs.
Thank you, and thank you again all for your testimony.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Sires for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the panelists to be here. I'm also a former mayor of a community across from the 9/11 towers. And if I learned anything in my years as mayor is how unprepared we were to deal with a disaster. I mean, one community didn't know what to do with the other one fire department didn't coordinate. I also represent the tunnels. The tunnels were closed. People were coming down. They didn't know that the tunnels were closed. So everybody sent their fire trucks and the rescue teams and everything trying to help. But we were so unprepared, and this is the topic that I worked on over the years. Today, we're much better. You know, county works a lot better. There's more coordination, there's more communication, there's more equipment because of the grants that we've been receiving. And we are a lot better prepared now than we were. So my concerns are with the cuts. You know, I represent the ports. I represent the Port of Newark, the Port of Elizabeth. And if we get a cut what they're talking about, it's going to be devastating for our security of those ports. I mean, a small attack could paralyze the commerce on those ports. So, you know, I guess what I'm trying to do, Mr. Lawless, is I have gotten the message that you are as concerned as I am regarding the security of these ports.
We're very concerned about the cuts to the Port Security Grant Program. We've worked hard over these last 15 years to achieve a certain level of security. We hope to maintain that level of security. But you're correct, Mr. Sires, on the potential for an attack in a port, that could result in the closure of most ports around the country, which would have a dramatic and devastating impact to our economic vitality as a country. And we're hopeful that we can maintain that level of security, and our goal is to prevent any type of attack in that in the ports. Just to mention, working together with integrating with our fire departments and our police departments. We heard from Mayor Pugh talk about the Boston Marathon bombing and the success of the first responders in saving lives and responding to that attack. That's all a result of training that we do together, exercising, drilling, meeting, having plans in place. And a lot of that has been the result of port security grant programs, UASC grant programs that have supported those training programs. And without those programs, it will be difficult for local cities and towns, states, and port authorities to continue that high level of interaction, of training, and of equipping our first responders to meet these challenges that we face every day.
You know, I'm one of those people that believes that the fire department, you can't get them enough equipment, you know, and it's very expensive. I don't think the community knows how expensive it is. But today, you know, with all the requirements that fire departments and the type of equipment, I don't think you can survive without grants. I don't think these communities could make it without some form of grants. So
I agree, Representative. You know, I happen to be, my career was in the city of Johnstown, where we've had our share of natural disasters, man-made and both. But I was on duty when 9/11 took place, and I saw what happened during that day. As we all know, Flight 93 came down about 15 miles from where we were working. We evacuated downtown and how it stretched our resources. The communication system collapsed. The cellular system collapsed on the day that that happened. It changed our world as we knew it. And personally, I was one of 3 or 4 hazardous materials technicians, and in the coming months, we ran hundreds of white powder calls because we didn't have a hazmat team. We have since built that hazmat program. We have since done urban search and rescue, confined space rescue, river rescue, all because we had monies available to do that. My concern is with the taxing of the resources that we have is maintaining the infrastructure we've been able to build. It's very difficult for small communities to provide those resources as it is, and if there's cutbacks to that, it's going to make it even more difficult for those choices they have to make.
My time is up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Serios. Ms. Napolitano?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the panelists for this long hearing. It's really important. I come from a different point of view, and I ask Ms. Reeves, Smith-Reeves, Mr. Crossley, Mr. Martinuska, and Mr. Roberts, what do you think your first responders, your men or your women, are prepared mentally? There are many suicides, both in the fire department and many other securities, that we need to be concerned with because if our first responders face many, many challenges. They deal with work-related tragedies, and they have to take it home. Are you prepared to give them mental health services, and would these grants cover that training?
I'll let Mr. Roberts start.
So from a law enforcement perspective, we have robust employee assistance programs that deal with stress. Police officers deal with a lot of the things that the rest of society doesn't want to deal with. We're the ones left to deal with it, and I think it really impacts our employees. We have a pretty robust program that deals with that. However, these federal funds aren't used or intended to be used for that type of program. Although there's a need, I believe there's definitely a need, not only in our profession, but in the firefighters and other first responders. So there could be a niche there.
I'll echo Mr. Roberts' comments. The subject of PTSD in the fire service is reaching epidemic proportions. Just this week in the state of Pennsylvania, we witnessed 3 line-of-duty deaths. And working with our members across the state, you can see the toll that that takes upon them. And we hear about this every day. The grant program doesn't cover that. We are making strides to get our folks the help they need through our international and through our state associations, but there's definitely a lag with that type of, first on recognition and then on monies to help.
I agree with their comments about the grant fund specifically funding that for first responders. I know in my line of work, we do, as part of our training program, offer training on disaster mental health because you have to watch. I've responded, everything since 9/11 to disasters in Kansas and Ohio, and I know that the stress of seeing the devastation that can happen after disaster, so we do provide training on how to plan to deal with those effects. Not with the direct impact of a chief taking it back to their department. And we do depend on the employee assistance programs and the particular incident stress debriefing to handle those, but the grant support for it to expand that and deal with the day-to-day stressors would definitely then have the direct impact of supporting if there was a major disaster and you see that kind of devastation.
And this is also an opportunity for us to leverage other partners and their grants and mission sets, such as Department of Health Services. One of the things that they also support is behavioral health aspects. And so these critical incident stress management teams that do come in and provide the support that has been discussed helps the first responders and ensures that their families are also taken care of at the same time. So it's vitally important to everything that we do, especially in these high-stress environments.
Well, I realize that this is not directly addressed in the FEMA, but it is important to note that many of the tragedies are, especially in bus or rail system, sometimes mental health plays a big part in people, well, being antisocial, let's put it that way. I would hope that in the future you would consider maybe asking for inclusiveness in the program to deal with that, because as much as you can give them equipment to ready them for the purpose, you should equip them for their well-being. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Ms. Titus for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for letting me sit in on this subcommittee. You know, I represent the heart of the Las Vegas Valley, from the airport down the fabulous Strip to downtown, so this issue of emergency preparedness is very important to my district. I'm also especially delighted that we have as one of our guests and members of the panel our Assistant Sheriff, Mr. Roberts from Las Vegas, to give you some perspective of the unique challenges that we face. Not only do 2 million people live there in the valley, but we welcome every year over 42 million visitors from all around the world, speaking all kind of different languages, and don't know how to find an exit except from the Paris to the New York, which is a 20-minute walk. So we need the help. Not only do we have all these strangers in town, we hosted last year 4 of the top 10 largest trade shows in the world, including consumer electronics, which brought in over 170,000 people in a short number of days, just that one convention alone. Electric Daisy Carnival welcomes more than 320,000 attendees. We have 11 of the 20 largest hotels in the world in my district, and pretty soon we're likely to see the Raiders playing there in the district too, and that's going to bring even more crazy people to town. I'm a Raider fan, so I can say that. So when we talk about UASI funding and the Department of Homeland Security, we have special challenges. You heard Mr. Roberts say that the formula is not constructed well to take into account places like Las Vegas. We've been saying this for years, that the formula is funded. It fails to reflect the impact that a terrorist attack would have not only on the regional economy, but also on neighboring Nellis, on Creech, on Boulder Dam. All of those things are left out of the formula. We need it to be updated, and every year we go back and ask for a little more money for Las Vegas, get a little more, but that's not enough. It's not the way the formula should work. So I would ask you, Sheriff Roberts, 2 questions. One is, would you give us, and you mentioned this just superficially, some specifics of how that formula needs to be changed, like recognizing convention centers as opposed to lumping them all into one? And second, and all of you can weigh in on this, is that this money is supposed to go to improve our preparedness, make us less susceptible to whatever the catastrophe might be. But do we really do a good job of evaluating how efficiently that money is spent? Because we seem to give the same amount of money to the same people every year. Are they just adding things, or are they really improving the situation? Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, ma'am. So I would, the one issue that we have is, that you mentioned, is clustering. We have several of the world's largest hotels in the world, but they're treated as one cluster under the threat analysis program, so we don't really get a true reflection of the threat that should be measured. Another issue is that we don't include two of our large military installations that are there. They're covered under another program, but however, those folks live in our community, and there are threats in our community that those grants that are covered by the military don't cover, so we do that out of the minuscule amount of money that we get from UASI. And then to Congresswoman Titus's point, as far as the second portion of your question, and I've already forgotten now.
Oh,
Sorry.
Efficiency of using money. How do we evaluate it?
So, to the point that she makes is that on oftentimes there's a lot of money built on target hardening, or a lot of grant justification built on target hardening. But because the grant cycle is so long and they're reapplying for grants in such a short time, there's no evaluation on what was done with those funds. And so I believe that should be an important part of the process, is that because some of the larger agencies, now I'm not going to name any, but we've visited that I've been before, they can't spend the money that they get because they get so much of it. And some of the smaller, lower UASI areas just don't get any funds.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I would just add, Ms. Titus, that the Nonprofit Security Grant Program has been that in nonprofit organizations, hundreds of them, have received funds, including the Jewish Federation in Las Vegas. The decisions are made by local law enforcement doing assessments of the physical plant, and then with federal law enforcement making the final decision. And they're done in $75,000 or $100,000 chunks, so it is assisting many, many nonprofit organizations across the board who have these assessments that are done each year. So it is a vibrant program and one that we endorse and has been very helpful in protecting at-risk nonprofits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. These are all important programs. They have a strong return on investment, that they save lives and money in post-disaster recovery. The National Preparedness System and the grants that help implement it allow the nation to share critical response capabilities between states and communities so that every state doesn't have to duplicate those capabilities. The system is a force multiplier, and it is money well spent. Not every state can afford an urban search and rescue team or a chemical response team, but this system gives them access to such teams when they need them. In addition, the pre-disaster mitigation grants are a competitive program that hardens high-risk properties so they avoid damage during disasters. Study after study has shown $1 spent on mitigation saves $4 in future disaster spending over the life of the project. The way to save on disaster costs is to prepare for disasters and reduce disaster damage. If we are not prepared, recovery can be delayed by years and add billions of dollars in federal disaster spending, economic losses, and lost tax revenue. When it comes to pre-disaster mitigation, prevention is worth its weight in gold. Thank you all for your testimony. Your comments have been helpful to today's discussion. If there are no further questions, I would ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses have provided answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing, and unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for any additional comments and information submitted by members or witnesses to be included in the record of today's hearing. Without objection so ordered, I would like to thank our witnesses again for their testimony today. If no other members have anything to add, the subcommittee stands adjourned.